Hope everybody is doing well. This is Mark Lee coming at you from the Hayti Heritage Center. That's right. I was over here today. We had a lot of other things going on in this particular cultural arts center located in Durham, North Carolina. So we had our youth arts intensive, and sometimes those kids are learning about drones and robots. Today that was not the case, but they were having some dance classes, some drumming classes, some dance classes, and a number of other kind of classes. I think there was even a creative writing class or two going on as well. So that was something that was happening here. We had the jazz band practicing downstairs, and of course we had one or two other events that were taking place, also including Satos, which is an offspring of Collage, doing their dance classes and some drumming classes as well. Thought the Quilters were going to be here, but the Quilters were not here this weekend. Maybe it's next weekend that I'll be seeing our African American Quilter Circle and all in that space. And of course, we do know that the Poetry Slam is held here regularly. And of course, there are oftentimes lectures that are held here as well. This, of course, being a historical church back in the day, the St. Joseph's Church, and that is why the organization is run by the St. Joseph's Historic Foundation. That particular church has now moved down further down the road and not that far from North Carolina Central University, which is part of the whole Black Wall Street area that existed right here in Durham, North Carolina. And of course, we had some business leaders and some education leaders, including the one that got me to the Marquette University way back in the early 80s. And he was a big time and is a big time supporter of education, that being none other than a friend of the family and a friend of mine, that being none other than Howard Fuller. So Howard Fuller is how I got to Marquette, and I know that King Randall might even know about Howard Fuller since he is a advocate of charter schools and other kinds of things in that space. But a lot of folks don't know he also helped create the Malcolm X school that was here in Durham, then moved to Greensboro, and then unfortunately is no longer around. But some of those educators are still around, even though they might be in different spaces. And of course, he's done a lot of work in Milwaukee in that educator space and also as an activist as well. So I was thinking about that as I was hearing about and thinking about bringing on King Randall, and I'm bringing on King Randall right now. I was also thinking about something that I heard recently, that King Randall was honored by none other than the King family, because they were thinking about that King legacy and all along that space. So that was very much of a good news to hear that you were honored as one of the young leaders that are following in the tradition of what Dr. King was all about. So I'm sure that that had to be a tremendous honor for you. I saw that on your LinkedIn profile and some of your LinkedIn information, and I was even reflection, and this is actually where I'll get to hearing more about King Randall's thoughts and all in that space. But when I went to school, Howard Fuller got me to Marquette, but Harry Amana got me to a journalism camp in UNC, and we actually had to write about community and chaos. I think that was the title of the book that Dr. King wrote, and all along those lines. But one of the things we had to do was, even in the early 80s, we had to look at what was going on in the 80s and what Dr. King would think about it at that particular time. And I was a teenager at that time. And now in the 2023, I'm thinking that some of the same things that he was bringing up in the 60s, unfortunately, are still the issues that we're dealing with now. So it's kind of a shame that we've come 60 years into the future from when Dr. King passed away, and some of those same issues are still out there. But I'm just wondering your thoughts, because I remember when I wrote that, I was talking about the war, because there was a whole other war kind of thing that was going on. I think we had gotten out of Vietnam, but there were other war conflicts that were coming in, whether that was in the Middle East or whatever. We were still dealing with homelessness. We were still dealing with poverty, and we were dealing with a lot of other issues, including the relationship between our youth and our law enforcement. And I'm thinking to myself, at that time, it was maybe 15 or 20 years since his death, but it was still relevant. And even now in 2023, those are still some of the same issues that the kids that you're working with are dealing with. So I was just wondering, will we ever get to the point where we get the answers that I think Dr. King was looking for?
Well, for me, I think maybe when we again bring our fathers back around, and when we're talking about the relationship between law enforcement and our children, and particularly black boys, I think it's a lot of lessons that need to be taught in regard to just law enforcement and the children in general. For example, how to interact with law enforcement. A lot of issues happen with law enforcement because boys don't know, for one, they don't have proper etiquette with anybody in general, let alone proper etiquette with law enforcement. how to interact with a police officer, what happens when you get pulled over, what do you do, how do you speak, things that you do. Not saying that, all these things, something bad still could happen, sure, but you want to lessen the likelihood of those things happening by not arguing, not cursing out the police officer, not going back and forth, and not committing crime to begin with.
Right.
These are things to talk about, in regard to law enforcement and our children. But I definitely think, we could see Dr. King's dream, his vision, for our people uh, fulfilled only if we, put our feet on the ground and make something happen. As far as, getting legislation, working with our kids, teaching them how to read and write, proper etiquette, all these different things. There's so many different pieces to the puzzle, but as long as everybody's in their different areas fighting for what should happen, I think we could see it as long as everybody plays their part.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now I know that part of the your getting involved in this, of course, you created your own school, and I definitely want to learn more about that and everything in that space. But you first got involved in a lot of this when you were a youth, and I understand that there was a high level of crime in your hometown. So I was curious if you could tell our listeners what that hometown was, and also a little bit about how you saw some of what was going on there and how you tried to make some differences even at that young age before you went off into the Marines.
Yes, sir. Well, right now I'm 23. And I started the program when I was 19. One of my classmates got sentenced to 30 years in prison for not necessarily being at a murder, but he hid the murder weapon. But he wasn't at the actual crime, and they gave him 30 years for that. And just at that time, realizing that there are no type of rehabilitation or juvenile recidivism programs to help our youth. That's where I got the idea to want to start an after school program to start out. And I started here in Albany, Georgia. Right now, we're number one for crime in the entire state, which is unfortunate, and considering we only have 72,000 people here, if I'm not mistaken, give or take. It's not big in population, and you would think Atlanta would be number one, but we are. And it's quite a shame, and our children cannot read and write here. The numbers are absolutely ridiculous, and they cannot do math. Only 39% of our students are graduating proficient in reading, and only 19% of them are graduating proficient in math. It's absolutely ridiculous the numbers that we have here, but that's the world that we live in, and we're expecting these children to graduate high school and become upstanding citizens, but they can't read and write or do math. So what do we expect them to do? And that's going to be committing crime, especially if we don't have any real mentorship happening, and not any men in their lives, and so many of them are in single mother households, and that's something that we want to change. And seeing that so many kids couldn't read and write, that's where I got the idea to want to open a school. And here we are in 2023. We're getting ready to finish up our first year of our school being open, and I've just been happy to see it happen. Right now, we are just kind of figuring out, like, working through all the kinks that we had this year. It's our first year open, and we're excited to see what happens next year. Our students have developed and progressed, and we're ready to see what next year looks like.
Yeah, that sounds great that y'all are doing that great work and everything. One of the things that I've done when I'm not working at this cultural arts center is I work for a testing company. It's actually one of the leading testing companies in the country and everything. But I sometimes, even though I work for that company, get frustrated when there are so many teachers that seem to be training for the tests. And you can even see that in the reflection on some of the work from the kids, both, and this is a program that tests kids from around the nation. I would even argue with some of the tests from around the world. But I was just wondering
Hmm.
your thoughts around that, because it does seem that some of our teachers, and I have a great deal of respect for teachers, have relatives that have been in that teaching profession before retiring, and have friends that are currently in that teaching profession, both on the college and the grade school levels. But I was just wondering your thoughts, because that is something that I know a lot of folks are concerned about, is that it seems like the schools are worried more about the test results than the actual learning from the children.
Yeah, and I really don't like. I honestly think it's disrespectful trying to lessen the requirements or lessen what needs to be, I guess, known to pass the test, because it's like, well, you guys are not smart enough to pass these tests, or so we're just going to keep dumbing down the curriculum so you guys can pass. I think that's, very disrespectful to our children. On top of, teachers not having any real protections There's so much chaos happening at schools nowadays. I mean, we're just looking at video after video after video of things that have been happening for years, but people are just now posting. Like today, I watched a video of this kid. She sprayed her teacher with pepper spray. And I've watched videos of kids pouring hot coffee on teachers, and I mean, it's absolutely absurd. But if this teacher retaliates or anything, then there's oh, they shouldn't have retaliated. They're supposed to be the professional one. I'm like, well, if a kid is pepper spraying me, I'm more than likely not going to react in a nice manner. I'm probably going to hurt it. It's just being honest. But this is where the world that we live in, and the schools right now are just like a complete jungle. My mom was working at a school with special needs children up in the Atlanta area, and she was just working with special needs kids. But the type of jungle that the school was every single day was a mess. From hurting the teachers, from fighting every single day. I mean, it's just throwing desk, throwing all types of stuff at the administrators. And I mean, not just fighting them; they're like beating up the resource officers. I mean, this is what's happening at our schools. No discipline, no learning happening. Just complete and utter nonsense happening at schools. And this is why I feel like we should open our own schools, and teach what we believe should be being taught at these schools, because they're ushering in degeneracy, and no actual learning for our children. And looking at where our children are headed right now, they're headed straight to hell. Being honest, because of what's happening, and I mean hell on earth. And I really want to see us change that in our curriculums, in our schools, and just in our communities in general.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of folks have been looking at our professionals. I know that I'm here in the Research Triangle Park area and everything, and sometimes that they wish we would go back to the old days when people would come in and share about what their profession was. You might have the dentist that would come into the class, or the police officer, or even somebody that was an entrepreneur or something along those lines. And I know that some of that takes place, but I don't know that we see enough of it. But I just wondering your take on that, and are you going out to recruit some of the professionals and some of the scientists to make sure that they are providing role models to the students that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, that we usually speak to, everybody that, interacts with us, if they're able to teach our students anything, we always open the door for them to be able to do so. So we've had people bring, their equipment down to teach the boys how to use it, such as welding, and teaching them how to build things. And I mean, we've had people come from all over to try and show our boys how to do things. We have another workshop in June. This construction company is bringing a couple excavators and tractors out to teach the boys like how to dig with the big machines and everything. I mean, this is what we want for our boys to see, and not only just to be able to see, but to also believe that they can be successful. We have an issue also with having our students and our boys only thinking that they could just play basketball, football, and rap to be successful. And if they're successful in any other way, then it's bad because you must be in the Illuminati, or you're in bed, with the white man or something like that, just giving them all this nonsense. And I'm like, no, there are actual successful black people, successful black CEOs, successful people, that successful doctors, successful lawyers that live in great lives, that are leaving inheritance for their children, who work hard and make good decisions. And this is what we want to teach our boys, not that they're not doom and gloom, and not that their life is destined for failure. We want to teach them that they can go and make something of their lives while they're here, and they can do it. And we want to show them other people who look like them, who are successful. And this is why I reach out to them, and those who may not be playing sports or playing basketball or rapping. There are many different ways to be successful, including myself. I try to be an example to them. I'm 23 years old, and just for them to see me be young and be successful at what I'm doing, it inspires them to want to do something with their lives. And that's what's most important to me.
Did you know that you wanted to be an educator, or that you wanted to be involved with youth activism when you were a youngster yourself? So, were you one of those folks that were a leader at a very young age, maybe even running a Boy Scout troop, or being involved in a number of activities, maybe even some activities that folks might not want to always be involved in, but we know sometimes we got to do what we got to do to survive. So, did you always have those leadership qualities, or is this something that you felt you developed after you got into the Marines and later on in life?
Well, I was in the church my whole life. I've always played the drums So I've always been active in youth ministry. And while I was in high school in 11th and 12th grade, I used to go give motivational speeches at elementary schools and middle schools while I was in high school still. Just trying to encourage students to be better and encourage them to make better choices. And I graduated college before I graduated high school. I graduated with an associate's degree in culinary. And I also led my culinary team to second place state championship in high school. We second place in business management, culinary in high school. So I've been pretty much leading the pack for a lot of different things. Growing up, and I think that's probably where it comes from. Just leading a lot of my friends and peers and kids in the neighborhood growing up. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. As far as like working with children, I never knew that I was going to be doing exactly this, but I knew I had to make an impact somewhere, and I just figured that out along the way.
That makes sense. What is something that you learned from being a chef and in that cooking space that you have brought into your leadership life as well? Because I know a lot of times folks will think of things as being, right brain and left brain, but it definitely seems to me that you have had something that had to be on that creative side. Because to me, not being the best cook in the world, being a chef can be a very creative field. I know that actually both of my parents and my younger brother are master cooks, even though I'm doing good if I can get out there to go to one of the fast food restaurants because I probably spend way too
Hmm.
much time in the whole DoorDash and fast food space and all along those lines. But what are some of the lessons that you learned from the culinary life that have helped you in the rest of your leadership?
I would always say mainly patience, because you're having to work with so many people, and even in the college space and culinary, like the classes aren't short classes like the other normal classes you take in college. Like these classes are like 6 and 7 hours long, so you're in class all day, and cooking some of the same things over and over again, and at catering events till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and dealing with people and all that stuff, I was able to figure that out early. Just having a lot of patience. So a lot of people, that's why I never really get upset or angry and things like that. Not often, anyways. It's just because I learned patience from a lot of things, growing up, especially in the kitchen, and then going to the Marine Corps. The patience just skyrocketed to 1,000. So it takes a lot to make me upset. It takes a lot to get under my skin. It can happen, of course. We are human, but for the most part, it's going to take you a while to dig at me before I get upset. And that patience is a virtue, and I learned that mainly in that kitchen, figuring out different things, learning different things, learning new dishes, and just being able to step out on faith also. So definitely would say patience, patience with people, and patience with myself, and just patience in general.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think is the number one dish of yours? Because I know that everybody has their specialties. There are things that they like to put in their dishes. I know that we have a fellow podcaster here on Pod TV that came from Louisiana, so she likes to add a little bit of that Cajun cooking to some of the things that she puts on her dishes and everything. But I was just wondering, what is a King Randall dish that folks are always asking you, whether it's your students or whether it is when you were at home, that they've got to have that particular King Randall dish?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get much time to cook anymore, which is funny. I don't get much time to cook because I'm like consistently moving around and doing stuff. But when I first started out cooking stuff, I'm not even into pastries, but I learned how to make cinnamon rolls from scratch, and I just kind of perfected that over the years and added my own little, flavor to it and things like that, as far as the filling and the frosting and stuff. And I kind of made it my own unique cinnamon rolls. But yeah, I would say that. But for the most part, I can cook anything. Just as long as you ask me to do it and give me some time to cook it, and I can make it happen. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. I had a pleasure of talking to a MMF promoter not that long ago. I think it was this past Monday. But
Hmm.
I think both she and her husband, I know the husband was, I think she served as well in the Marines. And I was telling her that when I first heard about the Marines when I was in college, that was the service of the branch that was going to be the most gung ho and everything. It was kind of like the stereotype was that, the Air Force people would do whatever they do in the air, the Navy folks would do whatever they do
Hmm.
in the water, and the other branch, what would that be? That would be Army would be doing hand combats and some of the other things. But if you wanted to just have somebody who's going to be gung ho and just kind of go guns ablazing, that was going to be the Marines, and that was the stereotype.
Yeah.
When I was in school, the joke was that if you had an open field and there was um, fire a line of protection for the Marines, and the enemy was on the other side, the Marines were just going to run guns ablazing, and whoever got through, and hopefully you got to the enemy and made that kill. So I was wondering if that was part of the appeal to the Marines for you, because that was kind of the stereotype, and I know that part of that is media stereotypes and just stereotypes in general, but it was kind of that guns ablazing kind of attitude that you oftentimes hear about the Marines.
I only went and I went right after I graduated high school. And it was really because my all three of my best friends at the time had went. Like, so I was kind of stuck back home by myself. I was working at Chick-fil-A, and I just was getting letters from them and things like that. And I went and watched a couple of videos on YouTube, and I was like, "Oh, I could do that." And there I went. So, and that's exactly what happened. I went and did it, and I would explain it as the best, worst, most beautiful, aggravating, awesome time ever. It's all that in one.
I can believe that. I don't know if you worked in the mess hall, but that is the other thing that was always the stereotype, was that whether you're watching old shows like MASH or whether you're watching some of the more modern ones, they would always give the kind of food that was served in the military and any of the military branches as being not the best of the food. But then I've had friends of mine that have been in those different services, and they said it's not as bad as they try to make it out in the media and everything. And actually, there are some pretty good chefs that are working in there and are doing what they can with what they've got, and oftentimes having to serve many folks in that space. So I was wondering if you had a chance to bring your chef background into your military background.
No, I did. I was in I guess you could say logistics. I was driving forklift and all that. I mean, most people call it supply, of course, but I was driving forklifts, make sure everybody got uniform items, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But no, we had the food was great, honestly. We had our chow hall. She this lady named Miss Jackie was over our chow hall, and it's a black lady named Jackie. I mean, it was great. It was great food all the time. I mean, I don't know because we never had that bad food experience unless we like had to get box chows, like when we were out in the field or something. We had to get our little box chows or whatever with sandwiches in it, little cold sandwiches and some trail mix. But when we went to the chow hall to eat, I mean, we had great food. I mean, we had great food all the time. So we ate good, three great meals a day. Whenever we had to eat. Other than that, I mean, I really didn't have too much bad food in the Marines. We, of course, traveling around to different bases or whatever. You got different types of food, but it wasn't like nothing. I'm just like, ew. It was. I mean, it wasn't bad at all.
Well, that's good to know. Coming back to school and everything, but coming back to something that you mentioned earlier, because you mentioned growing up in the church, and I was reading recently. Actually, we brought up on our news show not that long ago. Some people were thinking that it could be a great idea. Other people were wondering, since we are not all of one faith, if that was going to be the greatest idea or not. But I know that I think it's in Texas. They've been looking at the possibility of having the Ten Commandments on the school walls, and I think almost mandatory on every school wall and all in that space. And I do know that there are schools of different faiths, so I'm not sure how they will work that into the law. If there is a Indian school, like meaning like some a Hindu type school, or a Muslim school, or or even some of the other school systems that might be out there. But I was just wondering what your thoughts were as to um, whether we did right by taking, because there's that whole separation of church and state, whether we did right in
Hmm.
that space, and also your thoughts around faith in general and how important that's been in your own upbringing.
I mean, I would say as far as I don't think government should have nothing to do with it. I believe in freedom of religion. I don't have an issue with prayer being in schools and things like that. I think all that is important. I do. However, I don't think that it should be forced by the government. That's something I don't believe in. Forcing stuff by government. As soon as you give government power to enforce certain things, and they start wanting to enforce this and enforce that and enforce this, I think freedom of religion, freedom of speech, all that stuff is important. But as far as faith at our school, that's something we pride ourselves on with our school. And of course, we tell all parents that, and we tell all children that before they get there, that they will be going to church with us, they will be reading the Bible, we will be doing these things. And if you don't agree, then that's up to you. And I think that's something again that is extremely important. We have to be able to uh, teach what we believe should be taught at our schools. That's what I believe in. Obviously, if it's a government-run school, then of course you have to do what the government says. But we are not a government-run school. We are a private school, and we can do exactly what we wish as far as religion, and we believe that is important. God, faith, and family. That's straight to the point with us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see that and everything. I was having a conversation. It might have been on one of the podcasts, and it might have just been in some general conversations as well. One of the things we were talking about was this notion of how certain cultures have done a better job of even teaching finances, because they have talked about how certain
Hmm.
times that whole notion of generational wealth and even what your FICO score is and a number of other things are ingrained in certain cultures, and it may not be as ingrained in ours, and maybe that's something we need to work on and all in that space. So I just wanted, matter of fact, I know what exactly it was. It was an economic forum that was held here at this building on 2 days ago, and one of the community community activists brought that up. But what is your thoughts around that? Do we need to be doing a better job of um, teaching our kids about some of these things that other cultures may be teaching at a much younger age, almost from the time that they are born? And is that something that your school is doing?
Absolutely. One thing I believe in is routines and habits. And habits and routines, make up who you are, especially as a young boy and as a man. I believe routines build habits, habits build character, and character makes the man. That's something I say all the time. And a lot of people and a lot of other cultures are teaching children and boys things extremely young. And that's something that we are not doing, something we're missing the mark on, and why America is falling so low in regard to a lot of things in different categories. We just forget about things and think, we just live in la la land for the most part, I would say. And people are surpassing us, and we don't know when the next time something big will happen, and we won't know what to do. We won't know how to fend for ourselves. We won't know how to go find food. We won't know how to go, make things happen for our family. We won't know how to protect our family. These are things that I believe we should be teaching early, and this is why we teach, survival and how to work on things and how to find food and how to hunt and how to gather. All these things are important for our children, and other cultures are teaching their children these things. I've had pushback for teaching our children about firearms. I'm like, well, other cultures are teaching their children about firearms. What's the problem with us teaching our children about firearms? They're going to go learn anyway from somebody on the street, so we might as well teach them ourselves in a professional setting. That is important. And then once you demystify the gun for them anyway, then they won't want to use it all the time because they're just like, oh, okay, well, this is what that is. I have that experience already. Now I have no care to touch a gun anymore. Like that's how it is. That's where we are. But I definitely feel like there are some things we should be teaching our children early, that we miss out on, that other cultures are doing and teaching their children.
I'm glad you mentioned that. My brother is a president of the, I think I mentioned this in our correspondence with your PR people and everything, but he is a member of the Slingshot Club and actually the president of our local Slingshot Club. But they've done some work in the community, and I like to call those the Batmobile cars because that's what they kind of remind me of when I'm looking at them. But they've done some work in terms of going out into the community, like when their folks weren't graduating, they were going by and doing drive-by graduation ceremonies, and they actually have done
Hmm.
a recent fundraiser around MS, and that's actually one of the things that they were doing was
Okay.
they were giving away gun locks, just so that people would have something that could protect the gun and it could be secured and all in that space. Because a lot of times we will have folks that will have those weapons in their house, but won't have anything that will stop a kid from getting it and misusing it and all
Right.
in that space. So I was really glad that he had that going on, and they had some other things that they were giving away as well. And they've done a lot of other things that need to be honored and all in that space. I'm glad that y'all are doing that work in terms of firearms. And, even the Black Panthers were teaching folks about guns, but they were also teaching people about eating and all in that space because a lot of folks don't realize that some of that early programs that we now call WICA and food stamps were actually programs that the Panthers were doing over there in Los Angeles from my study of history and all in that space. But I'm just wondering,
Hmm.
one of the things we've been getting pushback on in our community is this notion of CRT. And to me, that's just nothing but teaching our history and everything. And I think that history should be taught from all perspectives. But I'm just wondering your thoughts around that. And do y'all try to give them lessons about some of the historical figures, both from the mainstream history, like the Jeffersons and the Lincolns, but also the George Washington Carvers and the Marcus Garveys of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I think we just have to look into again what exactly is being taught aside from talking points.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see the actual curriculum and what's happening with that because they're. I don't want it to be. They don't teach the right history. Like they'll teach Black history, but they don't teach the history that I would like to see taught. Like they only teach, oh, we got beat and robbed, and they took this and that, and slavery and all that usual stuff. And again, it to me, it just keeps that child thinking that he'll never be able to accomplish anything because he's Black, and all these different things. I'm like, let's do a different history. Let's talk about all the great things that we did and all the great people that were a part of different movements and all the great things that Black people were able to do in history. Not just we got lynched and we got this and we got that and these people did this and I don't care for that all the time. There's a time and place for it, but just drilling it in the kids' heads all the time, I disagree. Every holiday we got to have all these memorials and things like that for all these people that died, which is fine, but we don't do anything to what is uplifting them and making them feel like they can accomplish something versus being angry or being upset at what happened in the past. Be upset about it, but do your ancestors justice. I just got into a big Twitter altercation with some people because I was talking about Booker T. Washington and how I felt convicted that a former slave could read and write better than me. He taught himself how to read and write. And you talking, we are in 2023. I have YouTube. I have steady access to books. I don't have the threat of death for learning how to read. And he reads and writes better than me. I need a dictionary to read this man's book. That's insane. And I felt convicted to want to teach our students how to read better and hone in on reading because of what he did. And people came with, oh well, this and that is happening and this and that is happening and this and that is happening. I'm just like, yeah, I understand that, but I feel like we still could do something right now to fix our condition, even while fighting for different causes such as reparations and things like that. That doesn't mean wait, doesn't mean not do anything. There are things that we can do right now to help better our situation, and that starts with just simple stuff like knowing how to read, how to say your name, proper etiquette, getting the proper greeting of the day. These are things that children are not learning right now, and they don't have any etiquette, no respect, no accountability, etc. And I believe all of that could be looked at better if we taught different parts of history, not just the slavery part and the minor things. They never talk about the big things that we did. It's always the little minor stuff. No, let's talk about the big stuff that Black people did and the big causes that we were able to get taken care of and things like that. Like let's talk about those successes and not all just doom and gloom. That's what I don't like.
I agree with you on that for sure. One of the other things I know is oftentimes talked about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, is that, you know, single mothers have been out there for a long time. This whole notion of single mothers, even single mothers in our community, is nothing new and all in that space. But you will have some people that will say that part of the reason that our kids are not doing as well is because they are from single family homes. And I'm not saying that that isn't the case because there are a number of single family homes out there. My brother that I just mentioned is engaged, and hopefully this one will be the one that works. But he's definitely my two nephews, and the woman that he had those children by, they got divorced some time back and everything. He's actually been twice divorced. But that being said, I do know that that whole notion of the village is a very real notion, and not just in other communities like the Latin American and the Asian community, but even in our communities, at least historically. So there, I do sometimes wonder if that notion of the village has been kind of eroded. And definitely, I was just wondering your thoughts on that, because I know think that sometimes we think that these are new things, but I remember watching Raisin and Son, and some of these same conversations were in that movie that I think was set in the around the 50s or the 60s or something like that. But I was just wondering, what are your thoughts when you are hearing folks act as if this is something new under the sun, even probably some of your own parents?
Um, I think I talk a lot about the village all the time. And that's something that we need to get back to, because then single mother households would technically not be such a problem, because we still have people filling in for those missing fathers, or broken relationships or broken marriages or what have you, because people would still be filling in. Nowadays, is I want to do this all by myself, and now it's a spectacle to do it all by yourself. It's oh yeah, I'm a single mom who's out here trying to do it alone, and I know moms who have children with great men, and they do everything for their kids, and they're always around. They have their kids all the time, and they raising them good, paying for everything, and they still want to pretend on social media that they're doing it alone, and they have no help. And it's a spectacle now to be independent and not need help. Back in the day, that was it was shunned upon for you to be a single mom, or you wanted to do better. But now it's a spectacle, and we're all strong, and we don't need no man. And my I just me and my baby, and you don't understand what's happening to that child without having that father around. And even people, again, statistics always bear witness. Even children from single father homes, have a better success rate than children from single mother homes. This is just data and facts. Because of the way a man is going to raise the children. And we have a perfect balance, with a man and a woman when they have both parents in the home. But if one is missing, I posted a tweet. I think it was yesterday. It said, "Without a mother, a home loses its soul. Without a father, the home loses its mind." And it's I think that quote is powerful, and it's important, because we don't nowadays respect the gender role of each parent. We try and make one parent more important than the other parent, or try and make the kids not like the other parent, etc. Like it's a it's it's a bad circle we going in. But we don't realize how it's hurting the children. We're just worried about how we feel at the time, and not what's best for the children. We operate a lot off our feelings now, and it's not in what's best interest of the children. And not to mention, people just out here having babies recklessly. Just being honest, people just out having sex, and not really taking into account the consequences or anything, and just out here popping babies out. And or even moms who are dating a guy, and he got four baby mamas already, and then you thought you was gonna change them. Like, these are come on now, like, he got four kids and four baby mamas, and you didn't expect to be the fifth one. Like, let's think here, let's think these things through. These are things that we don't want to talk about often at all, because it calls for accountability. So it's easy to blame everybody else in the system and things like that, versus we could have just made a better decision. Or even the men, you see this woman got three kids already and three baby daddies. Why would you think, it's smart for you to go put a baby in her? These are things to talk about, but we don't want to talk about them. It's easier to blame everybody else. It's easier to blame the system. Sometimes we just make better decisions on our own.
Yeah, we definitely got to make better decisions on our own, and sometimes people don't want to think about the consequences because there are a lot of ready-made families, and at this day and time, there are even ready-made grand families and great-grand families, depending on the age that you are in and the space of the dating that you are in, and everything. Those are things that you have to reflect on, even if you are in that sphere and everything. Because unfortunately or fortunately, I know I'm still in that space of being single, but I
Hmm.
know that when I've talked to some of these folks, they've already got whole families and whole grand families, and I have to decide on my own terms if that's something I want to get involved in or not get involved in, because you have
Hmm.
to know from the jump street if that's something you want to get involved in and how far you want to get into that whole situation. But there's some folks that just dive in head first without thinking about what that will do to the family dynamics, and if the family dynamics are going to be impacted no matter what age you are, because you got to at some point deal with those family members if you're going to be a part of that person's family for an extended
Right.
period of time.
Yep. I agree. You got to
But I
make
don't
those
know there.
decisions, for yourself, and think about if that's something you want to do. And people don't think about it, and it just, like I said, operating on how they feel, and you just make bad decisions, and then you got to deal with the consequences for the rest of your life.
Yep, that's a lot of that. One of the bad decisions that a lot of our kids did for whatever reasons is a lot of kids got involved in. I know you mentioned having those associations with the inner city, with those whole bad communities, whether that's the drug community, whether that's the gang communities, or sometimes those are interrelated. But I'm just wondering, how much are you able to reach those kids, because I do find that a lot of the skill sets that those folks have can actually, if you can find a way to turn them around, are actually skill sets that entrepreneurs that are in legitimate businesses, and I even hate using that term because some of the legitimate businesses, I'm not sure how legitimate they are, like the pharmaceutical companies and other things. But I'm
Hmm.
just wondering, how much are you able to get these kids to understand that they can use some of those skill sets, but not necessarily face the same consequences that they would if they stay in the criminal lanes that some of them may be
Um, I talked the other day about hard work,
in?
and people, and I was trying to get people to see that there may be somebody that is working harder than you, but they're working hard on the wrong thing.
Right,
And it's important for us to have education, because somebody educating you on what to work on is important. I'm sure there is somebody at McDonald's that's working 1,000 times harder than I am, but nobody's taught them what to work hard on. They're just working hard. It's a lot of people working hard, but who's taught you where to put that work at? Where to work? Where do you put it? Where do you put your money? What do you do with your finances? So nobody's taught them the correct way to work on things. So yeah, people are working hard. Yeah, people are working hard on things they have no business. But
right,
who's going to teach them? Who's going to teach them the right way to go, in the way to make legal money and not go to jail and things like that? Those are things that we don't necessarily think about, because somebody like, I'm working hard every day and nothing's happening, and I'm working hard, and my light bill's still behind. I'm doing the best I can, but that's because nobody told them what to work hard on. What do you work hard for? Where do you put your money? Where do you invest? Where do you how do you make the better decisions for your family? And then people just don't know. People don't know what they don't know, and it's important for us to get into our communities and educate our own, especially inner city youth. They have knowledge that they have, especially as far as YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all this social media stuff. But we have to gear them and steer them in the right direction, for them to be successful. We have to take advantage of their different skill sets that they have, and learn them and teach them how to grow them. That is important, because these children are smart and they actually do want to do better. Many of them I meet, they want to have a better life, but nobody's ever shown them anything better. Nobody's ever taken them out of town, or bought them a nice meal or things like that, or treated them nice. So you never know, how you're affecting the child by just simply being there for them and trying to teach them. Some of them just don't know what they don't know, and it's important to teach them what they don't know.
what do you say to those folks that I've heard this conversation before, and you kind of alluded to it before, but there have been and we talked about that village before, and there was a time that folks would definitely call you out. I know that, I was the quote unquote, good kid, might have been the nerd in school and all of that, but didn't have a lot of trouble. My brother and other friends, maybe not as much so, but I do know that in the neighborhoods that I grew up, particularly in rural North Carolina, that if somebody was going to get in trouble, by the time I got home, it had already been reported on, and you probably had already been chastised on as well by several of the neighbors. So, like I said, by the time we got back home, you know, Mary, Sally, and John had probably already given you a chewing out, and maybe even a little bit more than a chewing out, based on what
Yep.
their feeling of discipline was and all in that space. But you got folks now that are afraid to even call out a child for a simple infraction in a grocery store or a department store at this particular
Hmm.
time. So, what do you say to those folks that, for whatever reasons, are intimidated and don't want to talk to the youth, even if they see the youth doing something that is plainly wrong, whether that is in the space of interaction, in their interpersonal interactions with, like, say, a store owner or somebody like that, or even their own parents, or even the way that they are dressed because they are afraid of what that kid may be packing, or the kid's reaction time and how the kid may react. Because I do think there are a lot of folks that are see that the thing kids are doing wrong, but are afraid to speak out, or even talk to the kids.
Yeah, I definitely would say. Now I won't tell people that they're in the wrong for maybe just being a little cautious,
Mhm.
because a lot of children nowadays are, again, no respect of person. They don't care who you are, what you do, what you're about. They do not care. So it's definitely important for you to pick and choose your battles. Like back in the day, my grandma could, tell a kid outside, "Hey man, pull your pants up." You ain't got no business out here walking around like that. Now I would tell my grandma, "Don't you talk to nobody outside." Like you don't talk to none of these kids. Like I remember this one lady I was talking to. Oh, she's the former principal of my elementary school, and she was talking about how bad the it's gotten nowadays. And she was like, she was walking outside, and she overheard some kids cussing or whatever like that. And she was like, "Hey y'all, stop all that cussing and stuff like that." And it was like, "Lady, shut the f up. You don't talk to us like that. Who the f you talking to? This is an old lady." I'm like, no respect. So it's like they have a reason to, I guess, not necessarily be afraid, but just be a little bit cautious and wonder, does it even really matter to even say anything anymore? Like, if you see a kid out here doing something, because are the parents going to reinforce it? Is the parent going to get mad at you for saying something to their child? Like, it's 2023. It's an entirely different dynamic nowadays when it comes to disciplining children, because nobody wants you to discipline your child. Nobody wants you to say something to them. Nobody wants you to get on their behind. I mean, it's here we are. So it's like it's like I'm like a rock in a hard place trying to figure out if they're even wrong for not saying anything. Because should you say something? Am I put my life on the line telling this kid to pull his pants up? It's this is where we are. And is anything going to really change if I tell him to be quiet or be more respectful and things like that? So those are different conversations to have.
How important do you think it is for both the kids and the parents to be involved in the greater community? Because I know a lot of times we, back in the day, would see a lot of kids that would be involved in things like the Boy Scouts, or we have the Boys and Girls Club here in Durham, where they'd be involved in a number of things. But, one of the things that we hear the complaints about with kids is that even though there's all this technology, that they oftentimes feel that there's not enough for them to do, that is that interpersonal getting together. Matter of fact, I think that was part of the reason of what happened there in Chicago at that park and everything, from my understanding and from what I've read on Twitter and everything. Some of
Hmm.
those kids were actually wanting to get to the park and have this party because there weren't necessarily those kind of activities that were available to them on a regular. And I know even here we have a skate park, and I remember it used to be that you'd see tons of kids there, and I don't even know if it's being as actively used as it used to be. And part of that is because of the pandemic, and a lot of us not
Hmm.
as much as we used to do. But I was just wondering, do you think there is enough activities for kids around the country, or is that something that we need to do a better job of? Is providing things for the kids to actually do with their free time?
Just depending on what part of the country you're in. Like where I am, um, there's really not much to do for kids. I mean, we have a few basketball courts and a little recreation, but we don't have like no skating rings. We got one movie theater that's way out of the way. They just closed the skating rink down. We don't have any like real entertainment here for our children to get into and things that'll keep them busy. So of course they're gonna get into things, but of course, bigger cities, Atlanta, New York, Baltimore, all these places, they got stuff to do. It just depends on what part of the country you're in. And but just again, just giving them stuff to do though, it's all in mindset changing. I mean, I could give you a 10,000 basketball courts, and is your mind changed? Is your mind different? You could still have all these things to do, and your mind still not be in the best place because of your environment still. So, those are again different conversations to have. But some places could use more entertainment for children, and some that do have entertainment should still focus on mindset changing for many students.
How satisfied are you with the entertainers and the athletes of the world and how they are doing in terms of being role models, or should they even be role models for the kids, or do you feel that they are doing enough to reach back to what they used to be, which are kids themselves? I know that there are some stellar examples. Like I understand LeBron James has done a lot back in his Cleveland area, and I understand there are some others, including Dale Curry and others, that might have reached back into their communities. And I know Chris Paul has done stuff with some of the HBCUs and all along those lines, but those are the few and far between in terms of those that we publicly hear about. Now, what they're doing behind closed doors, that's a whole other conversation. But how, as a leader in education, how satisfied are you with what you're seeing from those in the celebrity spaces?
they're of course they're only gonna do things that their handlers allow them to do. Um and to me, again, I appreciate things that are being done, but me personally, I just want to see some systemic stuff happening, not giving away Thanksgiving turkeys, not giving away clothes, not doing a food drive or none of that stuff. Let's teach men how to fish. Let's teach them how to go and get it. Let's teach them, proper ways to go get food. Let's teach them financial literacy. Let's teach like real stuff, or let's build real infrastructure, that are not owned by the public entities. Like, for example, the LeBron I Promise School. That's my favorite athlete, but that school is not his school. It's his name. It's still the public school system school. I'm like, let's no, let's build our own complete institutions. Like, that has nothing to do with the government. Like, let's do completely private, and build a curriculum that's suited just for students, and even for students who don't want to go to college. Like, let's foster environments for them. I mean, I don't like to pocket watch per se. People that are going to do what they want to do with their money, and but of course they have handlers too, so they can't do too much and things like that. But they all have ceilings and caps where they could go, so I can understand why some of them don't do more. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm satisfied or dissatisfied with what they're doing. They're just playing their role and doing what they're supposed to do, and that's be a celebrity.
That makes a lot of sense. Coming back to something else that you mentioned earlier, which is this notion of um, definitely those fields that are in kind of the non-professional fields, but more of the blue collar work and all in that space. I know community colleges here in North Carolina were very big on that, and we even saw some high schools that were big on learning the trades and all in that space. But do you think that that is something that needs to be done more in our school system? Because I sometimes wonder if we are taking the vocations out of the schools, just like we took some of the arts out of the schools as well. But I just wonder, as an educator leader and a young educator leader, are you satisfied with what we are doing in the space of keeping the arts and the vocations in the schools?
Oh yeah, vocation has almost disappeared from schools. That was how, we made money back in our day when, well, back in your day and whatever, everybody knew how to do stuff. You knew how to lay bricks, change a toilet, change a ceiling fan, do a little electricity, do a little plumbing. Most people are jack of all trades. You learn how to do stuff with your hands to make funds. And now kids don't know how to do anything. They can't even read. So I legit don't understand what exactly is happening at school. Like, I'm just like, they aren't reading, they can't write, you're not doing trades. What are you doing at school? Like, what is happening there besides no discipline and no accountability and no respect? Like, what's actually happening at school? And then the kids are allowed to do whatever they want, dress however they want. What's happening, at school? So that's, again, it's so many different conversations we could have from that. So
And along those lines, I know that there was a gentleman here who's actually one of our historians till he passed away not that long ago, but he used to talk about the Black Wall Street era, and he would talk about how the folks at that time were dressed to the nines. It didn't matter where you were going. If you were going just to the grocery store, you would be dressed fairly sharply, and even going to school, you might have what some people might designate it as almost a school uniform and everything. So I was just wondering how much of that kind of style would you like to see come back to the school? And is that something that y'all do at your school? Because I do know that there are some even charter schools where they have the people basically dressed in uniform because it gives them a sense of connection with their fellow students.
I'll say, I think uniforms should return to all schools, because of the way the internet is taking over with the fashion and trying to fit in and all that stuff, and parents not being able to afford what their children want because they're trying to fit in with Sally, and people are bullying them because they don't have the newest shoes or the newest shirt or the newest clothes. I think everybody should be wearing the same thing at school. That just eliminates one more thing that people could pick on you about. So not as they might pick on you because your shirt might be wrinkled or something like that, or you might smell a little funny or whatever. But they aren't just going hard like the kids do nowadays. Kids are evil nowadays, man. Kids will say anything to hurt you, and trying to destroy you. That's what they try and do nowadays. And clothes are a big part of that, and trying to fit in and posting on Instagram, social media, trying to get likes. I mean, it's a whole lot of conversation we could have from that. Our children definitely need uniforms back. That's what I believe in. It doesn't matter what the uniform is to me, as long as there's some type of uniformity at school. So that way, it just lessens the likelihood of children being picked on. And then, of course, there's a time and place for everything. Like, what time to dress urban, a time to dress, with a shirt and tie, a time to dress, casual. It's just knowing the time and place, and especially the culture that we live in here in America. Just time and place.
What do you say to those folks that are hearing about the state of the mental health of our kids? Because that's the other thing that I'm hearing a lot of people talking about is they are feeling that this is one of the most difficult times to be a child. And I even think about that. If I just think about the things that my nephews went through in their life, and like I said, they're about to be 14 and 15 as of this coming August and everything. So they definitely saw this whole Ukrainian war. They saw a pandemic. They saw a couple of earthquakes and some other things that were definitely devastating. They were born before 2001, so they missed the attack of the Twin Towers. But somebody in your age range would have caught that. So definitely, anybody from the millennials on down to like the young babies, I'm just amazed that more of them haven't cracked in that sense. But I was just wondering your thoughts about the state of the mental health of our young people.
A lot of it is a lot of it is social media again. Our children, it's so much happening on social media to the point now where it's popular to have some type of mental health crisis, and popular to have some type of mental disorder, and it's popular to be depressed, and popular to have this disease and that disease, and everybody's got a story to tell, and nobody's even went through nothing. These kids got bed to sleep in, parents at home, mama loved them, they had a good church, they having a decent, great life, got decent grades in school. Ain't nobody picking on you, but you found a reason to be depressed because you saw a post on social media that told you was depressed because you ain't get enough likes on your picture, and or you don't have this set of clothes or that set of clothes. Like, to talk to kids nowadays, I'm like, bro, like, it's kids like in different countries who have no ceiling, no floor, no water, and they're happier than you and me put together. Like, they're living amazing lives. They outside playing with sticks and bottle cans, and they are living a great life. And you're telling me you got somewhere to sleep, food on your table, you got clothes on your back, a nice haircut, your parents buy you whatever you want, and all that. You telling me you depressed? Please stop it. Please stop it. Again, all that social media stuff. And kid, I didn't even know what depression even was until I was like an adult almost. Like, I never knew about that stuff. I didn't even know what suicide was. I didn't find out about suicide until I was like in the fourth grade, and I only found out about that because my one of my uncle of mine committed suicide. Well, my aunt's husband committed suicide. That's the first time I ever. I'm like, what is that? Like, my first time hearing the word, I'm thinking like it's some type of mass killing or something because I heard of homicide and genocide and all that. So I'm like, well, suicide must be some type of gigantic murder or something like that. And they're like, oh no, that's killing yourself. Killing yourself. Me? Like, why would I want to kill me? I never even knew that was a thing. But you got kids who like 4 years old know about killing themselves. Like, you got 7-year-olds hanging themselves. How you even know how to hang yourself as a 7-year-old? Like, because you're looking at something online. Like, it's nuts. Like, I didn't even know the mechanics of hanging myself at 7 years old. Like, it's ridiculous. It's because they're seeing this stuff online. All this mental health stuff. Nowadays. I don't doubt that some of it is real, of course. But man, half of that stuff ain't nothing wrong with these kids, man. It's just TV, social media, all of it's popular now. You get more likes when you're depressed, and you get more likes to say something's happening to you and to tell your life story, and this person hurt you. And when you were young, your mom told you to wash dishes 2 or 3 times, and that traumatized you. And now you don't want to tell your kids to wash dishes. And now you got resentment towards your mom because she woke you up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go wash some dishes that you forgot about. Like, this is the stuff that I'm talking about. Like, these insane stories that people make up and their lives are fine. So I don't subscribe to that. These kids, most of them are fine. Yes, a lot of them go through actual stuff, but I think that we miss the kids who are actually going through things because it's so many kids walking around talking about they depressed and ain't nothing wrong with them. But meanwhile, it's kids out here that are actually being molested and actually being starved and actually being abused and actually have terrible lives and actually have trauma and things like that. And we're missing them because everybody else want to walk around pretending they got depression and trauma. Ain't nothing even wrong with them for real. So it's, again, another conversation that we can
No,
have.
along those same lines, I wonder sometimes. My dad is an artist, does photography and does some other kind of arts as well. And he was a retired professor from UNC, and mom worked in the philanthropy field, and both of them did media for a minute and everything. But at a very young age, they encouraged imagination. And I sometimes wonder if some of the imagination that is being encouraged is not that natural imagination, because sometimes we let the computers do the imagining for us and
Hmm.
all in that space. I wonder how many kids now actually look up at a cloud and try to picture what that cloud could be and all
I used
in
to do that
that
all the
space,
time as
because
a
I
kid.
used to do that as a kid, just like I used to go
Me
and play the
too.
license plate game where you try to figure out how many licenses you could figure out from the different cars that were going by and all in that
Yep.
space. But I don't know that kids are necessarily doing enough of that these days. But I was just wondering, do you think that that's something we can also encourage, is encouraging the child in all of us? Because I also don't think that adults are being that great in the imagination space either, in terms of like keeping that childlike wonder. But I also wonder if our kids themselves are doing enough in that space. But you're the one that's in education and an education leader. What are your thoughts? Are do should we be encouraging our kids' imagination more than we are?
Oh, absolutely. And we should foster different spaces for children to be able to use their imaginations more often. Because again, that's what we're missing too. Is their everything's so microwave now that they don't even have to use creativity. Now, I will say a lot of them get really creative in regard to social media videos and things like that. Like they get really good with those things, man. I've seen kids, put together some beautiful videos. Like my social media intern, he's like 15, and he does a lot of my videos on that I post online and things like that. They can get creative. You just have to do it in their way now. So of course our way was I did the same thing you did. I used to look outside and look at the clouds and pretend it was something and make something of the clouds and count cars and all that and be sitting in the car with my friends and pretending, that the cool cars were ours. We'd be like, key lock, that's my car, something like that. Like we just in the car, making up games outside, doing stuff, playing at the little apartment complex energy box. Like we used to do stuff. We had fun because we didn't have phones, but when phones came along, it was like all of our attention went there. So they do have creativity still. We just have to do it in their way now. And we can foster it still, but it's all in trying to go to where they are per se, like going to think about what they see creativity as and trying to open up their creative mind with things that they do now, and not just what we thought creativity was. We have to grow with the times. So.
Speaking of growing to times, what do you do with technology when so many kids are bringing that technology to the schools, whether it's the Oculus sets or their personal phones that are also their computers and all in that space? So I know that there are some schools that literally grab that stuff at the door and they can't bring it in to the classroom, and there are other
Hmm.
schools that might allow it in, but there are only designated times that they can use it because it is part of the course curriculum and all in that space. But I'm just wondering, where do you stand with that, and how does your school operate in that space? Because I have heard of some schools that literally, I know I probably would be frustrated even though I didn't bring mine to work today, but usually I would have it here with me and everything, and they would have literally, if you walked into the class, you'd have to turn over that phone and they would give it back to you at the end of the day because they knew too many of the kids were
Hmm.
absorbed in communication with their friends and maybe occasionally family, but definitely their friends, and not just friends in that particular school, but maybe even friends in other schools. Even though I sometimes wonder about that, because I've also seen family members that all four of the family members are on their devices, and I thought they were having family dinner together, but it looked like they were having family dinner plus eight, so they were all talking to different other people on their devices. But I was just wondering, how did your school handle that?
Yeah, no electronic allowed at the school. We have laptops to help with, of course, their classwork and things like that, but no technology, no social media, no phones. It's not tolerated at our school at all.
So they're not going to have that whatsoever. So they won't have those distractions
Nope.
and everything. And I'm imagining that if they have to get in touch with a parent or a guardian for emergencies, y'all have like some sort of a emergency station or someplace that they can go to, whether that's the office or whatever, so they can reach
Hmm.
out to the people if that is what is happening. So they don't have to bring their cell phone, but y'all give they have access to those numbers, and y'all can either make the call for them or they can make it at a designated office space. Am I correct in thinking that?
Correct. Yeah, of course. We'll make sure they, talk to their parents and stuff, of course. But for the most part, no cell phones at all. We don't believe in it. No social media. Absolute nonsense for our children until we can teach them the correct things to do with it. We rather that stuff be off their minds, so they could actually focus at our school.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad y'all are doing that. We got a lot of people that were talking about the teachers during the pandemic, and there was even folks that said that they got new respect for the teachers during the pandemic. I think it was Shonda Rhimes, who is the Grey's Anatomy's producer, that talked about how she had a new mad respect for teachers because she saw what they were doing when she had to do it for herself when we first went into those lockdowns and all in those spaces. But I was just wondering, what is your thoughts around teachers in general? Are they getting paid enough? Are they doing enough? Or would you like to see maybe even a change in role in the way that we look at teaching in general?
I've always said, I think we should have an ever evolving curriculum.
Mhm.
And I think that's what all schools. I think, if you pay attention, a lot of people just have these standing curriculums they've had for 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years. I'm just like, no, like these times are growing and we should be doing evaluations every year with students to see what exactly they need to do and what they need to grow. And what the kids had 12 years ago, the kids in 2023, they have an entirely different mindset, entirely different mind frame, and things that they need to learn. And I think these curriculums should be ever evolving. And if the curriculums are ever evolving, then the teachers are evolving also. But if you keep the same curriculums, the teachers gonna almost have to stay the same because they have to teach the same things that you've been giving them every year. So I would definitely say ever evolving curriculum is a must. So that
No,
way our teachers could evolve.
not exact, but I'm glad you brought that up because I just mentioned earlier that I have done work in the educational assessment field, and I can tell you, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but you probably are because you probably had to work with those Georgia assessment companies as well as some of the other assessment companies out there. But a lot of those haven't changed either. There are some of those courses that I think are about 20 or 30 years old, and they're still
Wow.
using the same rubric. So maybe not that old, but they're definitely using some that are dated and have been used for multiple years
Hmm.
and all in that space. So I'm like you. I'm like the times have changed, the spaces have changed. So it seems to me that
Right.
the just like the coursework needs to change, the tests need to change according to the times as well, and don't use the same
Absolutely.
examples all the time.
Yep, I agree. Absolutely. We definitely have to grow these curriculums, have to grow our schools, have to grow our students. The times are changing and we have to change with the times. We can't stay stuck in 2000, 2001 or 2002. Got to keep it a buck and keep it, growing every year.
What would you say you would like to see? This is the year 2023. Let's just pick a random year, 2030. Where would you like to see education be in our country? And where do you think education is now? We've alluded to some of the troubles that education has, but if you had to give a grade to the U.S. Education system, what would that grade be? And what do you see that we can do to get it a better grade? Because I'm thinking it's not going to be an A plus, but I'm not going to put words in your
Yeah,
mouth.
it's definitely a super F. We have to completely change the way we do education nowadays. Of course, what they're doing is how they want it to work. But of course, people who are in education know that it's not the best and it needs to change, including teachers who are teaching right now and things like that. But we have to change it ourselves. I've said that multiple times. We can't continue to rely on government to do for us what we could do for ourselves. We could keep asking and keep begging for them to change things, but until they're met with competition, they will not change. They will not grow. They will not be forced to do better because there are not enough private schools to ratio the public schools and give them any true competition. And that's what I want to see. The people start their own schools and people teach children what they should know and what they should be doing and receive the funding to be able to do so.
What are your thoughts around charter schools? Because I mentioned that earlier with Dr. Fuller, who is a family friend, and definitely I would consider him a somewhat of a mentor in my life and everything. But what are your thoughts around charter schools? Because I know there are a number of them. We have Saint Sia here and the Durham Nativity School and a couple of others that fall in that charter space. But I was just wondering your thoughts around charter schools.
Yeah, I have an uncle that used to teach up there in Durham. His name is Javon Clark. But yeah, so I definitely think charter schools are awesome. and I think we could use more of them. And it's basically a privately, what's a public funded private school. And that's what we love to see. School choice is important to me. I believe parents should be able to choose where their children go, and what kind of education their children get. And of course, going back to private schools, I would like to see private schools get funding also, for teaching, as long as they're teaching, good and teaching correct things. I think private schools should get funding too, because children should be able to get different kinds of education, whether that be religious background education or whatever, as long as children are being taught, not just in public schools learning nothing, especially if the schools are performing horribly. If we have private schools that are performing better than the public schools, or charter schools performing better than the public schools, then we need to shift the funding to where the schools are performing. And that's something that I believe is important, and for children to be able to go to those schools.
Yep. What do you think? Well, one of the things that I did, well, one out moving from one town to another town, there was a period of time that my parents decided to take me out of school, and they did homeschooling. I think mom homeschooled me for about a year and a half. 'Cause, yeah, sixth
Hmm.
grade, I was definitely back in elementary school. Something it was like fourth and maybe fifth grade or somewhere around that line. So homeschooling has been out there for a while, and I want to say it was because I was protesting. I might have been upset at some mandatory test that they were giving or some mandatory like physical or something along those lines. But my parents actually backed me on that one and all in that space. And like I said, mom homeschooled me for about a year and a half, and definitely learned a lot during that process, including some stuff that I even bring into my life even to this day. But I'm just wondering, do you think that that is another space that you would like to see more of? Is both official homeschooling as well as just home being involved in the schooling process in general?
Yeah, of course. I think the schools could do better, if parents would get more involved. I think that that's something important too. And then, for homeschool programs, I think those are important, and people should do homeschool groups. So that way, it makes it easier for everybody, and then it creates a village effect for those children. Homeschool groups are important. Find people around you that are like-minded, who would like to teach your children at home, and all of you can work together on making sure it's something easy and affordable for you all if everybody works together. Of course, it's hard with only one parent, but if you have eight parents who all want to homeschool, you all could work together and make it happen, and it could be a successful homeschooling program.
Do you think that the PTAs used to be very big and definitely everybody was involved in PTAs? And of course, there was the images we would see of PTAs on those television shows that were set in like the 50s and the 60s and maybe even the 70s and all in that space. But do you think that the PTA is still as fundamentally effective as it used to be? Or would you like to see maybe even a rehauling of the way that that is organized as well? So, how do you feel about the PTA systems in general?
Yeah, I mean, I believe this is parent teachers, right?
Uh,
Yeah, parent
yeah.
teacher association. Yeah, I think that's important. Parents and teachers definitely need to cooperate. Obviously, a teacher is going to be a second type of parent, so it's important for you to have a great relationship with your children's teacher. That's super important if you want to see your child be successful. There's no way you can see them be successful when you never met their teacher or never had conversation or never talked to them. That's absolutely insane to me. If you want your child to be successful, it's important for you to be involved at the school and help the teachers with your children, because they are your children. It's not just a babysitter. This is somebody who's affecting your child in a huge way. This child is kind of with that teacher more than they are with you during the school year. So you want to make sure that child is getting the proper nourishment, mentally and education wise. So please make a relationship with your child's teacher. Those are important. PTA, that's super important, and I think it should be kind of revamped.
Speaking of revamping, you just gave me a brilliant idea. I'm gonna throw it out here, and then I want to hear your thoughts around this brilliant idea that just came into my mind. But sometime back, I was recruited, and like I said, I have friends in the education space, so they had recruited and asked me. It just turned out that it wasn't for me at that time, and didn't feel like getting involved in the political games that politics involves as well. But there were some people that were trying to push me at one point to run for our local school board. Not saying that I might not do that in the future or at some point in my
Hmm.
life, but at that particular time, it was not worth it. And I also didn't feel like going into some of the political landscape and dirt and but throwing that politics can get involved in and all in that space. But this is the brilliant idea that just crossed my mind is every time that I see school boards, I don't care if it's a Georgia school board or a North Carolina school board or a school board that you watch it on YouTube, because a lot of these things are advertised and everything. They are usually in the city or county governments, or like one of those city or county uh, buildings of one sort or another. I personally think that maybe the school boards should actually meet in the schools, because it seems to me that there are a lot of times that the school boards are making decisions about the school and they are either retired from the school or they don't have that much dealings with the school in the first place. So how can you administer something that you don't necessarily have a connection to? That's just my
Right.
question, because I know that there are a lot of folks that get elected to these positions because it looks good on their resumes and everything. And I'm not saying that there aren't school board members that don't have kids, and I'm not saying that there aren't school board members that aren't teachers, but I do know that there are some school board members that you're sitting there going like, one, how do you even know what's going on in the school right now? And two, do you have a connection to the school? So what do you think? Do we have school boards around the nation that are actually maybe more attached to the school?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important. Like we have, like for example, our superintendent where I live has never even been a teacher before. I'm like, how's he even the superintendent of schools and he hadn't even been in the classroom?
Right.
So these are things to talk about. But yeah, there are school boards, that could be done better. But this is all in people, choosing who they want and making sure they're in tune with things that are going on in their local politics. People don't pay attention to local politics, and it's very important. If you want your children to be successful, pay attention to who's on your school board and what they're doing.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I know we got to wrap up and everything. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. I'm going to get you to come
Absolutely.
back on with our news show, because we also do a news show. I think I sent you a list about that for this Monday or Tuesday.
Sure.
That might be my other show, but I definitely have to get you on one of our 10 a.m. news shows, because I know there are some other educators. But one of the things that I do with all my guests is I let them tell where they can be reached at. So if you want to tell where folks can learn more about this particular school of yours that you founded, I was going to get into that whole founding conversation, but we can get into that at a later time and everything. And also, if you this is a global network, so I always try to get everybody that comes on to share their message of positivity and hope. And you've given some of those even during the course of the conversation. But there any other messages of positivity and hope that you would love to share? So if you want to tell folks, one, about the school, and two, any message of positivity and hope, and then we'll get out of here after those answers.
Sure. You can find us and support us at the xforboys.org. That's THEXFORBOYS.org. You can go there to see all of our photos and videos. Go there to see how to donate. Go there to see how to volunteer. Go there to get on our mailing list. And I always leave most podcasts with a quote from one of our local hometown hero rappers. His name is Cantrell. He says, "Obstacles are optical illusions. Don't jump high anyway. Jump high just in case."
I love that quote. That is a great quote and everything. We're going to get out of here with a little bit of food, because I'm going to get out of here and get some food myself. I'm thinking that's probably what King Randall is going to do as well. But we have Can Spices, which actually Barbara Smith, who is a motivational speaker. Shawnee is a disciple of hers, but also in that motivational space as well. And she created a spice company that is named after her dad. So she even talks about that in this particular commercial. And then right after that, we'll be done with the show. But I've appreciated this, and I hope that you'll come back on in the not too distant future and share more
Yes,
of what you
sir.
got going on. But I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks so much.
No problem.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond. So it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.